expanding the mind beyond this reality. Remember that the collective awakening can start by planting one seed, so thanks for being such an amazing audience and sharing these shows with your family and friends. So without further ado, let's jump right into the episode and find out what we're discovering today. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Enlighten Up podcast. So happy to have you guys here with me. I'm excited because I have a new guest. I have a Seth Leaf Pruzansky here, and he has published his book, The Fight to Enlight, Initiation Through the Heart is the Only Way to Win. He's a successful entrepreneur, performing musician, co-founder of livingnuts.com, tourmalinespring.com, and editor of the blog I'mAwakeNowWhat.com, a website that's devoted to globally awakening people to the power residing in their own consciousness. Oh my gosh. It's so great to have you here, Seth. Thanks for coming on the show. Oh, well, I was watching you on Andrew's show last week, and I loved your energy, and I love your story as well. And you have so much profound insight and wisdom, and more than anything, which I talk about this all the time, your frequency shows up so powerful, even more so than your words. So I think that's really important to bring forth to the channel. So thank you so much. Oh, 1 second. They can't hear you. And let's find out why. No. I can hear you. Can you guys hear me? Just let me know that you guys can hear me. And let's see, I've got the audio should be. Yeah, I know exactly. Let's see here. Okay, let me see if can you guys hear him now? Go ahead, Seth.
Hello, everybody. Let us know if you can hear me talking. Yes, no, maybe, kind of, a little bit. Nobody, huh?
They're saying they hear me.
Okay,
guys, just
but
give
you
us a
don't-
heads up if you can hear Seth. There's a little bit of a
Hello, everybody. Do you hear what I'm saying?
You're still on mute. What's going on here?
Let's see if it's on my end. I don't think it is because
No, because I can hear you, so they should be able to. 1 second here.
What's the channel name?
Oh, they can hear you now.
Okay.
Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, great. Okay, good. We're good.
Sometimes it takes a little bit to tune that frequency in, so I know.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks guys for giving me the heads up in the chat. I love you guys so much, and I've got Facebook and YouTube streaming in through, so we're all good. Okay, so let's start back at the beginning then. For those of you who are watching live, I was talking about how your frequency shows up more so than your words, at least in the power sense. It's so powerful. Do you want to just kind of tell the audience what they couldn't hear in the beginning?
Yeah, and so as I was saying, like that is such an important point, and it's something that's not by accident. It's very much by design. And in fact, a lot of the things that pretty much everything that I say and talk about came through experiencing it directly and not really having a vocabulary or books or anything to really understand what was happening internally, but just going through it with such awareness that I've been able to create my own vocabulary, my own words that others can resonate to and relate to. But it's based upon a state of being, and a state of being that is frequency, essentially. It's a feeling that overrides all of the limiting aspects of our conditioned, or my conditioned, human senses, to the degree that nothing holds us back anymore unless we choose to allow it. So,
oh, I love that so much. I love it so much. Now, you've had a very interesting journey. Do you want to just let my audience know a little bit of what you've gone through? Because I just did a live yesterday talking about how important it is for us to rise above some of the hardships that come in. And right now, 2020 is a pretty interesting year, and it's bringing a lot up for a lot of us. Everyone's getting triggered. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're looking at 2020 from. But we all encounter dark nights of the soul and hard times. But you've encountered some very difficult times. Do you want to just let the audience know what you've been through and how you got to where you are today?
absolutely. So, it's interesting for me to witness because everything that we're experiencing collectively right now are things that I've gone through personally and in my own way and in very intense ways. Being quarantined, I went to prison for 3 years, being socially distanced, being cut off from everybody who I knew and loved, everything, being sick or the fear of sickness. I've had chronic illness, having your issues arise at a time, at a time like this when everybody's doesn't know what to think or doesn't know what's going on. We want to engage with the addictive part of ourselves because we're looking to attach to knowns because we feel more comfortable because we're most used to that. So a lot of people will pick up addictions, they'll pick up vices, they'll just pick up things that keep them focusing on what they think they know or what they're most used to knowing. And that's like a comfort zone. I've been severely addicted to drugs, like to the degree where it's a miracle that I'm even alive. So I've been through all these different things. And there were so many times countless times throughout all of this, where I literally got to the point where there was so much trauma, there's so much baggage, so much karma, so much stuff that was polluting my perception of myself that I couldn't feel anything but pain, suffering, just like the most dramatic sense of not being well at all, total like out of homeostasis, out of balance, and feeling like, how am I ever going to regain a sense of wholeness, a sense of stability? And it was by going into the depths of my own suffering that I could really understand what it was like for others who were suffering, for the things they were going through. And for me, I had to go into these really deep, dark places so that I could be fully consciously aware of the healing journey from the depths, from the pit of hell, essentially, to become aware of all the steps that it took to climb out of that and to start feeling like, okay, things might be all right. Okay, things are going to be all right. And then from there being like, oh my God, I can take this to levels that I never even imagined. My wellness, my wholeness, I can just keep building from that. So it's been this thing of like having my own pain and suffering reflected to me in a way so that I could unlock my own potential and then help others do the same.
Oh, yeah. And it's, I find that it's those of us who really go into those deep, dark places are doing it because on a soul contract level, we've agreed to become teachers and way showers and healers in many ways to help people who are going through that very same thing and initiate them to also become the way showers and the healers. And it's like a domino effect.
Yeah. We are all born with such magnificence, such greatness. It literally is the predominant aspect of who and what we are. But we immediately start getting conditioned by the world, by all the different things that condition us and socially engineer us and make us believe that all these external things are more important than an internal state of being that we're born into this world with, and that we have the ability to cultivate to levels that are just unimaginable with our normal senses. But most of us don't do that because we don't know that we can, and the world doesn't teach us that we can. And now we're in a place where, it's like, it doesn't matter who wins for president. None of that stuff matters. The reality is we are a species that is totally out of harmony with nature. And everybody knows that. Like, we all know it, but we try to cover it up with vices and band-aids and, oh, this person will do something about it. And we are not taking responsibility for what is really going to change this. And that responsibility begins within us. It is by us taking responsibility for how we perceive this world and not getting distracted or caught up in the appearance of it. And instead just being like, okay, whatever this is, I don't like the way it looks, but it is here to teach me, to guide me, to give me a new perspective that I didn't have when I was caught in the belief of this thing that I'm perceiving, the illusion, you could say.
Yeah, and so you touched on perception, and you and I were chatting about that before we went live. And I mean, as I went through a massive shift at the age of 31, as I was telling you, while I was in a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And it was on day 4 where my complete perception was shifted when I was outside of my body for 2 hours, feeling nothing but pure contentment. Not bliss, not like super high joy, just contentment, acceptance with everything the way it was, me, the world, everything. And that allowed me to understand how powerful the mind and our own perception is when we shift that state of being within ourselves. What has been the biggest shift for you in your own perception that completely changed the game for you?
There's so many things. It's been a progressive realization of all this, but essentially, to make it really easy for the listeners, heart brain coherence, high levels of heart brain. So just heart brain coherence itself is the gateway to expanded perception, augmented perception. But then the more highly developed it becomes within you are like the keys to open up other dimensions of perception that where we kind of think might be there or have a feeling, but we're not really experiencing because we're so stuck in whatever dimension we're most used to perceiving the world in. So that getting into those states of being where the brain is in coherence with the rhythm of the heart, but it's not just the rhythm of the heart. It's like when you're in a Vipassana, you're breathing and you're slowing your breath down and you're feeling love or you're feeling gratitude or whatever. You're just feeling something that your mind identifies as being something, but it's not even that. It's just a feeling, but it feels good. And in that rhythmic breathing, in that ability to slow yourself down, then your heart rate slows down. And instead of being all jagged, which is what most people, their heart rate is in because they're so addicted to their own stress hormones that they don't know what it's like to feel whole or feel peace. But when you calm down, you breathe gently, and you can, like, if you were to look at your heart rate, when it's in coherence, it's like a sine wave. It's just this smooth wave-like pattern. When your heart is like that and you're maintaining that or sustaining it, then your brain is influenced and the rest of your organs in your body are influenced by that calm beat, that rhythmic feel. And your whole being starts communicating with itself, allowing this energy field that you really actually are, that's causing your heart to beat, that's causing your lungs to breathe, to start having a more holistic expression through your physical body. Then suddenly you're working in conjunction with this miraculous energy that is literally offering us all the gift to be alive. And that's when things really change, but it's heart brain coherence that is the doorway to all this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love heart brain coherence. It's something that I've talked a lot about, and it's incredible what happens when the mind and the heart are in coherence together, where you're able to use logic and pure emotion to help you understand who you are, what you're doing, and everything around you. You know, talking about that being the gateway and this idea of that coupled with the perception, how do you see that playing the role in the awakening?
We are so used to perceiving things from the outside in. Everybody does it. Everybody thinks it's normal. We don't even realize that there's another way. But when we do that, we're not taking responsibility for our own wellness, our own state of being. And again, when you look at the root cause of why the world is so crazy right now, it's essentially because as a species, we're out of touch with nature. And that comes back to, as individuals, we're out of touch with our own inner nature. So if we can get to the point where we can look at this objectively, and instead of hoping that somebody or something is going to do something about it, and we really take responsibility for our own internal growth, then we realize that it is our task, our duty, our job to cultivate higher and higher levels of internal coherence that we have to take responsibility for, because nobody's going to do that for us. And if we do that and we start getting in tune with the rhythms of our body, then our body is in tune with the rhythms of the solar system, the soul, and these cycles of coherence go into infinity. And it all starts with us as the individual getting in harmony with our body. So once we do that, then suddenly we're thinking and feeling at a capacity greater than we ever were when we felt disconnected from all these cycles. And once we're aligned with them, solutions to problems just start arising in the field of our awareness naturally, because the solutions to all the problems that we're experiencing right now already exist, but we're just in such a state of disconnect that we can't see it. And so we silently keep hoping that somebody or something is going to do something about it, but we're the ones that are going to do something about it. So in that way, the awakening is an internal process, like the name of your show. It's an alchemical process that we as individuals, at some point in our life, if we're going to truly be honest with ourselves, have to take responsibility for becoming aware of and then cultivating internally.
Oh man, yeah. And it's a scary process. It's not one for the faint of heart, most certainly. And I think that's something that it gets perhaps forgotten along the way as many of us begin to awaken to the realization of who we truly are, our authentic selves, understanding once we start to travel along that journey of truth within, we also are looking outside of us in the truths out in our external world. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I've been guilty of it myself, is when you go through this awakening, because you just want so much for everyone else around you to awaken, because A, it's such an incredibly new world, and there's just so much available to you, which you mentioned at the beginning, which we will get into. What are some of the pitfalls or traps that people can fall into through this awakening process, when oftentimes they feel alone because perhaps their family members or their friends or their coworkers aren't on the same page? It can be kind of lonely. How have you navigated, and what is your advice for it?
There's so many different layers and levels to that, but we are born into a world where we have habitually accepted that duality or division or separation is a reality. And so it's been so deeply ingrained into our perception of self as human beings that we have forgotten the internal mechanisms that we can engage that will help us dissolve that illusory perception of reality. So it's that objective perspective. It's realizing, like, if you keep getting caught up in thinking about what you've always thought about, then you're not present with what is actually happening. And if you're not present with what is actually happening, then you're probably in a constricted, contracted state where you are afraid of one or a million different things. And that fear keeps you really dissociated with what is actually happening and what you actually have opportunity to tap into. So you said something before, and I'll say this. I wrote a quote that essentially said something like, to become enlightened is one step, but staying enlightened takes countless steps. I've seen a lot of people who they have one perceptual breakthrough and suddenly they think they are God's gift to life. They are here just proselytizing, just trying to, top A grade evangelists, just acting like they know it all, they figure it out, or they just want to try to influence others because they're having these experiences, that are breaking them out. But there, in my perspective, in my perception, and according to the things I've been through, there are countless layers and levels of perception. And I've had awakening after awakening after awakening, only to discover that each layer and level that I go through is a whole new unexplored territory that is so humbling, that leaves me really figuring out that the more I know, the less I know. And the more humble I become, the more my heart just opens and I'm like, okay, I don't see this greater plan, but I feel it working through me. And I'm going to trust it. I'm going to love it. And I'm going to let the energetics of what is truly happening be what guides me through my human perception, instead of me as the person who has so much conditioning from this, polarized world to think I have anything figured out.
Yes, and that conditioning can get in the way of allowing the purity of that connection to source energy to filter through and allow you to have these incredible internal experiences that I know you've had many of. And I know many people in the chat, and they're just loving what you're saying. They're loving what you're putting down right now. What has been one of your greatest internal experiences, whether it was through meditation or reflection, that you didn't even know was possible to you before you had it?
It's an interesting thing because as a young child, I had the perfect childhood when I was young, for early childhood, before all the traumas and stuff started happening. But I lived deep in the woods of Maine with my mother and father and my brother. We had just the perfect ingredients for a happy life. But I had tons of love. I had just, everything was perfect. But because the ingredients of a good life were there, for whatever reason, my earliest memories are just going in my front yard and just staring at the tree line. And as I would stare, and nobody taught me to do this, it was just a natural thing because it felt so good. As I would stare at the tree line, the world around me literally began to disappear. And all that was there was my heartbeat with this energy. And I knew, even as a young child, that that's actually what I really was. And I knew that that's what everything around me was, because I could just naturally go into these deep states, which everybody can if they start understanding a few fundamentals of it. I think I just had the perfect ingredients that allowed me to do it without having to think about it. It was just a doorway that it was there, and I went into it and it was open, and it felt so incredible to explore that I just continued to explore it. Now, what's more interesting to me than that, which obviously is infinitely interesting, is how we can go from being in these expanded states of awareness to believing that we're separate, or feeling like we're separate from it. And that to me is more interesting because it really solidifies the idea that our perception of duality and separation is a serious hindrance for most people. And in my own life, Kay, it's a miracle I'm even alive. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. I've had so many near-death experiences where I was fully conscious of the entire process, from being in this human form to coming to the edge of this human form, and then just having the entire thing dissipate into nothingness, and being aware of what's happening to that as I dissipate into that nothingness. And there's been so many times when I have just been so immersed in the great universal coherence, you could call it, the source, like where I come from, where you come from, where everything comes from, that there was no part of me that knew anything other than that. And being aware that that exists and we have the ability to be in these totally expansive, unified states of being, but then to somehow allow the conditioning of the past or allow the conditioning of the world around us to infiltrate our human perception to the degree that we can go from feeling fully connected to feeling so disconnected that we don't even want to be here. We feel depressed. We feel like lost. We have all these fear-based emotions that can get over us. So to me, that's more interesting. And the reason I say that it's more interesting is because I know this is where so many people get caught up and get stuck. And this is what I want to help people be able to be aware of and overcome, because it's really just, it's the buildup of a lot of stuff that we as individuals keep feeding back to the universe, you could say, and we keep getting it brought right back to us. And we can overcome that by having a quantum jump and moving beyond it. Like, we can move beyond it.
So you were reading my mind because while you were saying that, I was curious, because this is a great way to segue into what you were just talking about. You know, you going to jail for, was it 3 years?
Yeah.
From just what was the reason?
Nonviolent marijuana crime.
And were you set up?
Yes, I was set up by a friend of mine for 15 years. Knew him, loved him, everything was great. He, but anyway, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt your question, but yeah.
Oh gosh, no. So wait, you were set up for 15 years before you went?
No, a friend of mine who I'd had for 15 years.
Oh, set you up. Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch. Okay. So that just adds a whole nother layer onto your experience in jail. With people, oftentimes, one of the hardest things is what you were talking about are the conditionings of fear and trauma and all these things that get us into these places where we become stuck and stagnant and fearful of moving into our own potential. Where was the lowest point for you while you were in jail, and how did you overcome it? Like, what were your tools that you used that would be useful to people who are going through low points in their life right now to overcome it and find their big, great potential?
It's a great question, especially because, as we said when we opened this up, the world essentially is experiencing a form of collective incarceration. So, this is
wow, you hit the nail on the head right there.
Yes. Yeah. So the question that you asked is really pertinent, and it's really applicable to what we're all experiencing individually and collectively. But for me, I looked at it like this. At first, when I first got there, I was the biggest victim in the world. I mean, I was blaming my friend. I was blaming the government, my own government where I lived, for putting me in jail for a plant that's on the verge of becoming legal. I blamed everybody and everything for my station in life. And, I literally, like, when I'm in there, every scenario you could ever think of, I'm playing it out in my mind. I'm like, oh, if I did this, if I did that, and just reliving the past over and over and over and going through all this stuff. And then I caught myself. I was like, wait a minute. I'm so resisting this place that I'm in because it's just bringing up all this fear and anger and sadness and depression, and all these things were coming up as a result of being in it. I was like, that I'm not even allowing myself to be present to what this actually is. And I remember being like, just kind of having these like moments of like, all right, wow, just the way I was thinking and feeling, I realized that I had long been incarcerated before I was physically incarcerated. I was in a mental and emotional prison that kept me stuck in these repetitive states of thinking and feeling that I accepted as reality, and essentially are like a perceptual prison that I gave life to. I literally made it. And then I started catching myself. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I remember literally saying, before I ever got arrested, my life was so hectic. I was so focused on all these things that the world teaches us have value and that seems like they matter, but they really don't compared to the things that are truly valuable and priceless, like our heartbeat, sharing connections with others from a selfless perspective. These are the things that we don't really value, but that have priceless value. So I was focused on everything else, going in all these different directions. And I kept saying, literally, like I'd say it out loud. I'm like, if I could just have a timeout, if I could just have a break, if I could just go to the Himalayas and meditate for a few months, having this like romanticized notion of going to take a extended meditation retreat. But I kept saying these things, you know, like literally. And then I caught myself. I'm like, wait a minute. I got a timeout. I literally got my timeout. And it's like, okay, it's not the Himalayas. It's not some cave with a bunch of monks. It's a prison, you know, in the United States. But I was like, what if this is that meditation retreat that I was asking for? You know, what if it really is? And then all of a sudden I'm not thinking in the past all the time. I start considering possibility. And I asked myself, I was like, who would I have to be to embrace this situation, to embrace these people that are yelling and screaming and fighting and sexually assaulting people, to embrace the prison guards that are treating all of us like dogs, literally, like, you know, it's like, well, I wouldn't have to be angry or upset or depressed, or I would have to open my heart to all this, and I would have to learn how to love it no matter how it appears to be. And you know, I was like, man, can I do that? And then the more I kept feeling into it, I'm like, I can do that. And then more things would come up. The more I would start to just like embrace stuff and get used to it. Then when feelings would come up about my friend who set me up and the government and all this stuff, I was like, wow, I actually have to forgive that. I have to forgive him for doing that. He was acting out of fear. You know, there is no them and us. They are us. We are them. Everything is so deeply intertwined that I realize that if I take responsibility for how I'm perceiving this, then the things that I've allowed to have so much power over me suddenly don't have as much power. And it reversed. Suddenly I felt the power coming up into my perception of self and reality. And then it just began to become a choice. I was like, okay, it feels incredible when I'm calm and centered and just being in here. And as soon as I start giving my attention to external things that can throw me off, it doesn't feel good. But I'm so habituated to considering and paying attention to all those things, then my job, my task is to keep bringing my attention back to this internal centered state of being, no matter what is happening around me. And so everybody's feeling like, oh my God, we're living in an unknown world.
Yeah.
That's amazing. This is the greatest opportunity that we could never even begin to imagine with the current perceptual state of being that most of us are used to thinking and feeling in. And if we can come to that place where we're like, all right, I don't really know why this is happening. I feel all kinds of fears for my job, my life, my wife, my kids, my family, my whatever. But I am going to tap into the part of myself that trusts that all of this is for a greater good. I might not know it, but I know there's a part of me that can do that. And the more you really get into that state where you're like, I don't know what this is, but I trust it. I just somehow trust it. I don't even know why I trust it, but I trust it. And if you just keep connecting to that part of yourself, you will go quantum. You will break out of all these perceptual barriers that 99.99999% of the planet is literally incarcerated by. And once you break out of it, then, and you know what it's like to feel the freedom that you truly actually are. Your entire existence is one of energetic freedom that is beyond human comprehension. But when you break out of that to begin with, then to go back to it just becomes choice.
You took the word right out of my mouth there, Seth. You know, talking about that, you chose to experience your experience in a completely different way than the victim. And that is what alters everything. That's what allowed you, as you said, to go quantum. And but also was this idea of how heart-centered you needed to become with yourself, with others, with forgiveness. And I'm, you know, I would love to talk about the importance of vulnerability, because vulnerability is something that I avoided for a large part of my journey, until possibly like the last few years. And it's why I started my Raw and Real series in last November, where I allowed my audience to see me live, where I would share very intimate, scary feelings that I was going through on my journey. And oftentimes I'd be crying on the live videos. And I think it's important for us to break the social stigmas that have incarcerated our hearts, basically, from allowing true human expression and being okay with it, and how needed it is for us to heal as a collective, personally, as a collective, and through this world. How has vulnerability impacted you in your journey?
It's such a great question. Again, so important. And so I'm gonna just really dive into this and just express whatever comes out, because it'll come out exactly how it's supposed to. But we first of all, I wrote this book. Okay, this book that I put out is the most vulnerable thing that I've ever put out. And when I wrote it, it wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna write this book and then I'm gonna publish it and I'm gonna put it out in the world, and none of that existed. I started writing that book because I had just gotten to prison. I was like, oh my God, I've ruined my life. I've hurt the people that are closest to me. Like, I'm screwed, basically. And one of my initial instincts was, okay, I'm going to write out everything I remember from my childhood so that I can reflect on it and look for self-defeating patterns of thought, of belief, of these things that kept me locked up, because I felt how stuck I actually was as a result of really being stuck, really getting incarcerated. So as I'm writing out this stuff, I just immediately saw the patterns right away. I had this beautiful connection as a child. It was there, it was natural, but I never had any way to articulate it. It was just a natural state of being. Nobody ever said, hey, what you're doing right now, if you just keep focusing on that, it doesn't matter what life throws at you, because you're going to be able to get through it. I didn't have any of that. I had nothing. And then something happens. I got bullied. I went through all kinds of terrible things that traumatized me, that took me out of this natural state of being that I was in. And I had all kinds of words and ideas for all the pain and trauma, because it was so prevalent. So many people are experiencing it. There's tons of vocabulary around it. And so not only do people experience it, but they keep talking about it, because it's such an impactful thing that we are like, this is who I am. We literally begin to believe that the things we go through are who we are, and that they make up our identity. And so as I'm writing out this book, and it's cathartic, right? Like, it was really purgative in that I could write these things down, my greatest fears and all the things that I went through, and get it out of me, right? To have it on paper. It was like, oh, okay, it's not in me as much anymore. But it was so personal and it was so vulnerable that there were times, even when I was writing it out, like, I'd be looking around my shoulder just to make sure nobody was looking, because I didn't want them to see what I was writing, because it was so near and dear to me. But as a result of writing, this book was 1,050 handwritten pages, by the way. And it wasn't a book. It was like, I was just writing everything I knew, because it's all I could figure out to do, And, it's jail. People don't have much going on. And everybody knew that I was writing, everybody in all the cells around me. And they're like, I want to read it. I want to read it. And I'm like, no way, And then finally somebody convinced me, like, please let me, like, I'll keep it to myself. And I was like, all right, go ahead, read it. And I let this guy read it. And he literally came to me with tears. He's like, you have got to put this out in the world. He's like, it just touched on so many things that not only am I feeling, this is the guy telling me this, he goes, but I know that so many others in the world are feeling and going through. He's like, this book is like the ultimate liberator. Like, it will help people face their own shit and just move beyond it. And I was like thinking to him, no way would I ever put this out in the world. It's so vulnerable. It's so intimate. Like it's just everything that I wouldn't want anybody to know. But I saw the effect that it had on him. And of course, he went and told other people about it in there. And so others wanted to read it too. I let other people read it. And the feedback was the same. People just kept saying, like, this has to be put out there because it's a medicine story. It's you are giving people permission to face and overcome the parts of them that the rest of the world doesn't give us permission to do. And I slowly got used to the idea of like, okay, if I did that, what would I have to be like? And I knew that in order to put something so vulnerable out there, I would have to be a living example of everything that I talked about. I would have to be so not triggered by all the things I wrote about that nobody and nothing could move me and take me out of this place unless I allowed them to. And so it took me a while. And believe it or not, after I got released from prison, which was in 2014, Eckhart Tolle's publishing company found out about it. And literally, I was in a contract with them for a long time, but I wasn't ready at that point. The book didn't get published because just for a bunch of reasons, but they were like, this has the potential to be something that changes so many lives. But I wasn't ready to do that. I wasn't ready to really, truly step into that role because I still had things internally that I was working through. But essentially, the point of it is this: I witnessed firsthand by being vulnerable, by sharing things that I would never want to share with anybody, and doing it. But okay, this thing, prefacing it, doing it from a place of feeling whole and complete. Then people were changed by it. They were like literally like, okay, I'm going to release my stuff. I'm going to talk about my problems because we don't talk about things that we are shamed into thinking we're not supposed to. People don't talk about drug addiction. They don't talk about emotional abuse. There's so many things that so many people don't talk about for fear of how they will be judged by others. And you know what? Those days are over. Like, look at this world. Look at what we've done to it as a species and as individuals. It's time for the individual to really love themselves, to love the essence of what makes us human, and let go of all the baggage of the past. And if that means sharing everything with everybody, which it did in my case, no problem. No fears around doing that at all.
And that's so beautiful. And I've noticed that. I've noticed that with people, I've noticed that just in my sessions with my clients. They allow themselves to get vulnerable with me. And I feel like I go through a healing experience while they are lessening their own burdens. What is it about that alchemical reaction that seems to happen when someone is vulnerable and shares that vulnerability with others? Why do you think it is a mutually experienced healing?
So again, just to kind of like touch on that, if you're sharing and you're being vulnerable from a place of vulnerability, from a place of wounding and being stuck, I don't know I don't know, it might be different for everybody, but I know for me, I got to a place of internal stability, of really just resolved internal coherence that allowed me to share my own vulnerability from a place of not feeling the backlash of it. You know what I mean? So I think for most people, it's difficult and it's hard because we're so used to thinking and feeling within these very narrow parameters that we can't imagine thinking or feeling beyond that. And because of that, we don't know how to alchemically transform base emotions that we're most used to feeling into higher emotions or higher states of being. And so that's why I really emphasize to people like, get in touch with yourself, learn how to love your body. I mean, there couldn't be any greater time than now to really learn how to love this energy that's animating your body itself, and make that such a habit, because otherwise we're thinking and feeling according to the past, and our body's producing stress hormones, and we're just stuck. And those days are not working, obviously, you know?
No. And you're absolutely right. Being in touch with your body is such an integral part to awakening. It was definitely for me. I realized how much my body was communicating to me. My cells were communicating to me, and starting to realize how much our consciousness is embedded in our cells, and allowing that coherence of the body to be one with you. And then like you have talked about in the beginning, coming into awareness of the natural rhythms of the body and you, and how then that translates into coming into rhythm with the natural rhythms of the universe, because we are taken out of these natural rhythms and are working against them, and not even with them. In many cases, we're not even aware of. What do you feel, or from your own your own ability to tap into the superconscious? Because I feel like we've part of the awakening that I feel like we're being distracted from through trying to awaken others, or being part of this experience outside of us, is it's taking us out of our ability to tap into the superconscious energies and knowledge and wisdom infinite, and allowing ourselves to get our information from that place, as opposed to always needing to get it outside of us. There's so much available to us. What have you been recently receiving through your own connection that is integral to the Great Awakening right now?
So this idea of objectivity, right? Being the observer of your own life and not being caught up in the normal emotional reactions that most of us get caught up in. So much of our personality has been formed according to what we perceive around us, when the reality of it is this very personality, this ego that a lot of people call it, has the ability to be influenced by these greater cycles that we truly are. And when that happens, you're not this victimized, hurt, wounded, self-depreciating character that a lot of people find themselves becoming. Essentially, they're just so enveloped in their own fear that they can't think or feel greater than that. But when you do, and you choose to get in alignment, and you make this internal state of being a priority, then these greater cycles start to literally influence the way you think and feel. Then that reflects through your personality. And then your personality is not one of limitation and all these things that keep people stuck. It's the opposite of that. It's one that's like, oh my God, like there's nothing but limitlessness. There is nothing but this great cosmic pulse that is activated, causing my heart to beat. It's causing galaxies to exist. It's causing universes to exist. And all at the same time, it's causing bacteria at the smallest subatomic level. No matter which way you look, from the infinite to the infinitesimal, it is all the same unlimited potential. It's like this grand, infinite repeating cycle that we can choose to get in alignment with by choosing to get in alignment internally. And for me, like, it becomes this thing of like, what truly matters here? Like, what matters? I mean, most people live their whole lives focused on themselves, their past, their limitations, and they know they're going to die, right? Because most of us die. I know a lot of people in like the spiritual New Age community will talk about, immortality and all this stuff, but that's not even on the table until we really address some core fundamentals first. So if you're going to leave your body, you're going to die, if you're going to face whatever it is that is unavoidable, might as well face it now. And really, that's what it comes down to. We are so afraid of death that we've allowed it to make us afraid of life. And the reality is while we're here living, and it's not to say, believe me, I have fears, I have things that come up, but instead of getting stuck in it and allowing it to pull me down like it used to do, I'm like, okay, this is just another perceptual barrier that if I can learn how to love and harmonize my perception of self with, then it's going to open up to a new level and layer of perception that I wasn't perceiving before. And this has happened so many times. And it's something that I've come to depend, like I count on it. I know it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen when I get through it because it ceases to amaze. It's always this constant process of revelation revealing itself in ways that you couldn't imagine before. But knowing that the greatest fear, the things that trouble us the most are our greatest teachers, if we embrace them as such, then it's amazing how, like alchemists, we turn those base emotions into elevated emotions, and how those elevated emotions can then be transferred into feelings that we don't even have words for, because they are so in alignment with the source of energy that we all come from, that we are just in love with the process. And we almost look for things to challenge us, because it's like, okay, what can I do next that's going to contribute to my own personal growth and the growth of the world around me, the community around me? You feel like you're breaking new frontiers. You feel like you're at the edge of the evolutionary impulse of life itself. And I think I said this on Andrew's show. We were getting into some great stuff, just going back and forth. But for all we know, we are at the cutting edge of the evolutionary impulse of life itself. And none of this, even as mundane and ordinary as people accept it to be, none of this may have ever existed anywhere, in any time, in any dimension ever before. And if that's the case, which it very well may be the case, like, wouldn't we want to bring our best to it? And isn't that a reason to, maybe it's not like that, but I'm pretty confident it is internally because of my own stuff. But if it is like that, my God, like, let's bring the energy. Let's bust out of these perceptual prisons and really own up to our potential here and cultivate it. Because if people could feel just a little bit of the things that I felt, they would believe it's true. They would believe in their own potential. I mean, it's not even about believing. They would just know it's there, and they would just keep giving that knowingness priority over the things that they're addicted to in their life. The things that they've come to accept as normal, that are not, giving them opportunities for growth and that trigger them. And you'd be like, no way. Like, I'm going to just totally bust out of all that and learn how to transform all of those things into empowering things that result in new levels of freedom, new levels of perceptual awareness, new frequencies, because we all are energy, right? There's an energy that's causing the heart to beat, that's causing our lungs to breathe, that is empowering the autonomic systems of our body. And it's an energy form. And when we take what little bit of intelligence we have and focus it on this innate intelligence of our body, our regular intelligence becomes influenced by it, and it expands. So we're no longer, it's not like, at that point, I'm not just Seth. This is my story. This is what happened to me. I am literally a living geometric field that is animating every single bit of my being, and all the parts of my body that used to hold on to the traumatic experiences of my past have been liberated. And now that frees up space for me to take this living geometric field that I truly am and focus it like a laser in each area of my body and open up new potential in these dormant areas of perception that are inside all of us. And that's what I do. I spend every day doing it. And if I allow myself to get caught up in anything that's going on, the drama, karma, Andrew had a great thing for saying that. But if
he's on right now. Hi, Andrew.
Yeah. Let's see if we can just bring all these dimensions together. And
you're touching on something like you just downloaded a bunch of great wisdom there for the audience to listen to. I agree with you. I always call our fears, what I say our fears are our lighthouses to our greatest potential. And when you can shift the perception of what your fears are, you can approach them in a very different way. So if you know that your fears are lighthouses to your greatest potential, then you get to discover, like you said, like now is the time for people to show up. We really have to show up. And there's no better time than now, in this very moment, and people need to really kind of get off of the meditation cushion and into this reality and put all of the beautiful insights and wisdoms and activated gifts that they have now into action in some form or fashion. And when you were talking about our personality, literally our personality creates our personal reality. And knowing that you can heal from the past traumas, going back and understanding what parts of your personality are coming forth from that part, and knowing like, what does my future self, what's the personality of my future self, and how do I bring that future self into this now? It's something that I've been working a lot on, is really kind of tuning into who my future self is, and how badass is she right now? What did she do to get to that place? And, what decisions and choices did she make that I have to make today in order to get there? And, when you start looking at it from that perspective, it's really inspiring, and it's action inspiring. What would you, before we close out, because you talked a lot, you just downloaded some great wisdom there. How would you inspire those who really have incredible insights, experiences that they've gone through that if they were to share would be healing for others? What would your advice be to get them off the cushion and into action-based, life-oriented living, bringing the 5D into actual 3D reality?
Yeah. I think it's going to be different for everyone, right? But ultimately, find what inspires you, find what makes you feel alive, and focus your attention on that instead of the things that make you feel uninspired, right? And I am an advocate for getting into heart-brain coherence more than anything, because the more somebody creates a habit out of being in that, then even if you're, not meditating, you're still aware of the things that take you out of that state. You can, the flow state they call, there's a million different things, but when you are in a state of heart-brain coherence, you are in the natural flow of your own body's rhythms and your own body's rhythms with the greater universe. And you can be sitting down, or you can be running or walking or doing whatever, and you can still maintain that same level of coherence. So I feel like that is the most important thing that anybody can focus on, because again, we are a species that is totally out of harmony with this planet because we are out of touch with our own inner nature. And our inner nature is one of vibration, frequency, rhythm, and it's accessible by getting into that coherent, calm, syncopated state. And when you get into that and you realize, okay, at some point you start feeling so good and feeling so whole that you realize that this feeling, this internal state that you have a hand in, is more important and more valuable and essentially priceless compared to any other thing that you're used to experiencing. You can get yourself into that mindset, however it may be, then things start to happen, things start to change. And then you connect with people like me, people like you, and you see that there are a lot of people that are in action, that are out doing everything they can to inspire others to create a better, more loving, more inspired world. Because I love this life that is allowing me to live. I love other people. I love anybody I love all of us. And we all have the potential to love at that greater potential, at that greater frequency. Because to love like that from a selfless perspective, it's not ours. It's something else that is doing it in conjunction with us, but it's greater than us. It's this frequency. It is this I tell people it's the best feeling you've ever felt times infinity. It has the ability to literally just move through every part of your being and come out through you into this world.
Well, there you said it right there. That is so important because if people, I love the heart mind coherence. I think it's an invaluable piece of insight for people to grab onto. If you being when it comes to awakening, the best thing that you can do is just be the model of your own awakening, of your own healing. You don't need to preach it to anyone. You don't need to force it on anyone. You just need to live it. And if you can bring that heart mind coherence into every little thing you do, even if it's heart mind coherence into how you make your coffee in the morning, how you brush your teeth, every little detail, you will start to emanate this frequency that makes people kind of sit up and look at you, tune into you, and be like, I want what's going on in that person. Like, what are they drinking? What's going on with them? And that's been my experience, is that anyone who, when I was younger trying to awaken, because a lot of my awakening started around 17, 18, and I found that when I kind of took my foot off the pedal of trying to outwardly awaken and allowed the inward awakening to speak for itself through my own joy, my own happiness, and my own acceptance of who I am and what makes me happy, and not worrying about the judgment of what other people will think or feel or look upon, that is when everyone in my outer reality started to line up. And I think that heart mind coherence in everything you can do is so important, and just be the model.
I couldn't have said it any better. But to add to what you're saying, it's true. When you do something internally and you've just made it such a foundational part of how you perceive reality, and you witness how it's having an effect on others around you, you don't doubt your own possibility after that. You literally are like, wow, I literally did something internally that is creating things to change externally. And like you said, you want more of that. Other people want more of it because it's much more in tune with what is actually going on than any of this disconnection stuff that has been habituated into our perception that most of us accept as normal.
Absolutely. So well said. So beautifully put. And I'm sure the audience, got you guys in the chat. Just tell me if I wasn't right at the very beginning. Doesn't Seth's frequency like supersede his words? Like, I mean, his words are amazing, but your frequency shows up and it hits you like a ton of bricks in the most loving way, of just really, it's so palpable and it engages you. And I think that is the most important thing too, is, and what I've learned in my experience is, what frequency are you putting out that allows people to want to engage with what you're saying? Because your message could be great, but if you're coming at it with a frequency that is aggressive, pushy, from perhaps fear-based, whatever it is, people can't absorb it. They don't want to be around it, even though the message might be good. And your frequency is just so welcoming and so engaging.
Oh, well, I realized early on that when you are in a cosmic court, essentially, when you realize where the essence of what you are actually comes from, you realize that the universe is a perfect accounting system. And I've had so much direct experience with that I just knew that I can't fool myself or anybody else. Like it's impossible, because if I try to do that, if I'm trying to fool myself or anybody else, it's gonna be equalized somewhere else. So I don't conduct myself with integrity because I'm afraid. I conduct myself with integrity because I love the potential of life as it's unfolding in real time, in no time, so much that I want to show up and bring my best to this whole thing. Because as I said before, for all we know, this may not have been happening ever before. And if that's the case, then whatever we bring to the table right now, we are literally the frontiers. We are leading a new path forward that not only can bring tremendous healing to our species, but that I feel, and many others, that it is necessary that we show up with this level of internal integrity now more than ever. Because the global situation, if you get caught up in it, it looks so dire at face value. But the reality is it's not. It's not at all. It's way more promising than any of the stuff that distracts us from it. But the only way we're going to get into that promise is by getting into this internal state, by habituating it, making it a foundation. And the proof of the pudding is that if you get in this internal state and you do it enough, then the coherence of the universe literally begins to reflect itself through your human senses. And you can't trick that. You can't fake it. You can't, it's when it begins to happen to you, you're like, okay, all right, got it. So
Yeah, absolutely. And like what you said is, I agree with you. I think we are on the cusp of greatness in this world right now because it's always darkest before dawn.
yes.
And as well, the awakening process is not pretty. And when you look out in the world right now, you certainly don't see pretty.
At all on any level. I mean, like my book, I've had some people who read it and they're like, oh my God, it's terrible. I'm like, did you read all of it? They're like, well, I couldn't because I only got so far. I'm like, exactly. Like, that's the thing. Like, no matter, like, you're going to let life get the best of you. You're going to get caught up. You're going to get stuck because essentially we all have the same story, right? We're all
Yeah.
born with this infinite potential. We have this awe and wonder as children. Then something happens to us. Whether, in my case, I got bullied really bad and, but whatever, some people go through way worse. Some people go through things that are not as intense, but whatever it is, something happened to us that convinced us that that fear or that trauma or drama or whatever it is was more important to focus on than this potential that allows us to feel awe and wonder. So when we get back to that and we realize like, oh, okay, I didn't know any better because nobody else really knew any better. But now that I know better, I can do better and I'm gonna keep doing better. And when you pay attention, attention pays you back.
Ooh, well said. I indeed. So, okay, one quick question from the audience. Wise Mama Bear wants to know, how does a novice tap into that, that energy that you're talking about? She can't even meditate. And Kimberly, the name of the book is Fight to Enlighten, and all of the links are in the description to get in touch with Seth or to get his book. But first, look, how would you help out a novice in understanding how to connect?
All right, get ready. What's her name?
Wise Mama Bear.
Okay, Wise Mama Bear. Really just calm down for a second. Just breathe slowly. Just calm your senses. And then listen to what I'm going to convey to you, because the reality is this: is you already are that. You already are everything that you seek to attain. And in the pursuit of you wanting to attain it is actually creating resistance that makes it more difficult for you to actually attain it. So the more you let go, the more you trust that whatever it is that you feel that's preventing you from being truly embodied, the more you let that go and trust that whatever it is for you. It's literally your unique signature. It's your blueprint. It's what stands between you and greatness. And it is your greatness that's giving you an opportunity to grow beyond anything you could imagine before. The sooner you release that, the sooner you trust it, the more you embody it, the sooner you're going to realize that you're already everything that you seek to attain and become aware of.
Ugh, deep wisdom right there. I learned that one on the journey. It's all about acceptance and allowance.
Yeah.
You just have to get out of your own way.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes that takes practice. It just, but I know what it's like. Believe me, I am so far from perfect. Like my life has been so messy. It's been so complicated. It's been all these things, but by holding on to all those details of it, it prevented me from really being able to see it for what it truly is. It's a masterpiece. It's this great art. It's this experiment of, I don't want to say experiment, but it's been this beautiful journey through to becoming aware of all this through the most brutal means. Some of these things were so brutal, but when I was caught up in the suffering that the initial experiences cast onto me, I couldn't see beyond them. But as soon as I could see beyond them, I was like, oh my God, they were perfect. And, you know, again, there is no us and them. There is no separation. There is no illusion. The reality of this is even the worst, most evil things happening on the planet, and a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, but the worst things that we perceive happening on the planet are this energy trying to get our attention in ways that we are not accustomed to paying attention with. And it's doing it because we have lived out of tune with our own inner nature and the external environment for so long that it's going to great measures in order to get our attention. But that when we give attention to it and we start getting in alignment with it, then it will release all of the things that seem so terrible. It will dissipate, but it's required now to get our attention, to light a fire under us so that we start reprioritizing where we are putting our energy or attention. And it wants us to become aware of, it wants us to have a relationship with it. And it's very simple, you know, and I'll say this to try to make it simple again. Think of it like this. It's an as the observer of your own life, there's some energy that's causing your heart to beat, that's causing all these systems in your body to work. And you, with your human identity, you're not doing that. You can affect it, but you are not the source that's allowing all of this to happen. So when you accept that something greater is already happening to you, through you, then you can begin to take your human personality that feels separate or disconnected from that potential. You can start taking steps to get more in alignment with it. And the more you do that, the more you value it, the more you focus on it, the more it starts to happen through you. It's amazing.
It really is. And, you know, you talking about this idea too of like trying to grab our attention and our energy. It's so important to when we're seeing all of the evils in the world and everything that's kind of going on to acknowledge it, but not give it our energy so that it imprints us, you know, with its,
We all do that. You said it right there. That's by allowing it to like imprint you or affect you to the degree where you're enslaved to it. Because what happens when you feel afraid or stuck or trapped by it, you project that fear, that feeling outward into it, thus empowering this vision to keep being alive, to keep being there. And when you realize that you're doing that, you're actually the one doing that, and that you can change that by making choices over and over to get more in alignment with the greatest thing that there ever could be anyway, you start making choices that are going to lead you to better and better ways that you can attain that and embody it.
yeah, you said it. And I think that is a perfect place to leave it off here because, you know, and when just that idea of understanding at the very like what frequency are you bringing into everything, always be aware of your frequency and where you're resonating, because you can still understand what's going on in the world but not let it imprint your frequency. And how do you then use your frequency to transmute it, to transform it, and to alchemize it to have the healing that we're all looking for? So thanks so much, Seth, for coming on the show. Let my audience know where they can find you. And I mean, I've got all the links in the description, but please let everyone know about you, what you're offering, and how they can get in touch with you.
Oh, okay. Um, it's funny. A lot of people are like, wow, you're aware of all these things, but you're an entrepreneur. Like, and I'm like, well, that's not what I am. It's just part right now, the systems in the world are requiring us to work within them to form better ways. So, in light of that, I'm like, okay, I can hide out in a cave and not get involved in the world. And I actually tried to do that, and I got put right into the world as a result of it. I can create business structures that reflect natural principles to the best of my abilities. They're never going to be perfect because we are in a process of working these things out. So I have two companies in the natural foods industry, livingnuts.com. It's all certified organic sprouted nuts and seeds. My brother and I have owned that for 20 years, livingnuts with a Z.com. I have a spring water company where my friend has preserved one of the last great natural sources of spring water, sadly, on this planet. preventing these multinationals from destroying it. He's done that, and we just do small hand bottling. We only capture the overflow. tourmalinespring.com, my blog where I get into all these things and more, I'mAwakeNowWhat.com. My book, The Fight to Enlight, it's on my website, it's on Amazon, and of course, you can find me going off about all this stuff on Facebook, YouTube, a little bit on Instagram, but yeah, mostly Facebook and YouTube.
It's so important that people understand this. We just got to keep talking here for a second.
Well, we can keep going
because you bring this up as you being an entrepreneur is so important, because a lot of people think that in order to collapse the matrix, collapse the system, you just have to leave it, get out of it. But that's not how you collapse a system. You have to collapse it from the inside, and you have to use your energy to transform it. And what better way than to use it in a way that creates products and services that better humanity?
It's so, like, just to go into that a little bit, a lot of what we believe, we have this idea of martyrdom, right? A lot of people are afraid to step into their power and shine for fear of getting killed. A lot of people believe that, or persecuted or whatever. A lot of people think that to truly be spiritual means that you are ascetic and that you're not involved in the world. None of that is true. That is all past beliefs that are so deeply and culturally ingrained into our belief systems that we don't even know that we accept it in that way. We just automatically assume it's like that. Take the past, throw it away. It has nothing to do with the now and the future. We are creating it here in the present, however we want, however we can envision and imagine it to be. Because when we're children, and before whatever has happened to us has taken us out of that power, we're able to imagine. We don't focus on our problems and the things that happen to us and woe is me. We're focusing on imagination, like letting these things play out in our head, like all these beautiful potentials. Like, we're literally using our imagination to create new visions and new possibilities. And now that we're adults, we can still do the same thing, but we can self-actualize it. We can bring our visions and potentials into this world through the systems that are currently existing and improve them as we go. And don't get hung up on it. Like, no, believe me, my companies aren't perfect. Nobody's are. And the more we accept that and realize that we are progressively making the world better, look, every system in the world right now is either crumbling or collapsing. Every single one. Is it any coincidence like that they're all going at the same time? The journalistic model, the governing model, the medical model, like every single one is under fire, coming apart. It's so obvious that something greater is attempting to get all of our attention. It has been forever. It's always been doing it. But because people haven't been paying attention for so long, it's like, okay, let's make everything go haywire all at once, because we'll see if that gets them to pay attention, to wake up.
Exactly. And do you pay attention? Do you know the tarot at all?
No.
Oh, well, so, okay. There's a card in the tarot deck called the Tower. And then when the Tower shows up, it's like, woo, obstacles are getting removed from your path, and it's going to probably be a crisis event. And right now we're seeing a lot of tower moments happening globally. Like you said, all these systems collapsing is literally like the tower coming in to collapse all these systems. But what's so great, the very next card after the tarot is the Star card, which comes in for healing and also wish fulfillment. But what I love to say is that the Star card to me also represents all the star seeds, and it's the star seeds coming in to pick up all the pieces and to transform all the systems and to make this entire world functional and efficient on systems of the star light. And so just know that just because the system didn't work before doesn't mean it can't be transformed and to be available to us through our own creations and to promote ourselves, because we're worth it, we deserve it, and people benefit from what we have to offer. So why hide it?
And in fact, the exact opposite, because we're getting to a place now where enough people are breaking through the perceptual ceiling, and it's helping keep everybody else in check in a way. Like, and this is beautiful. This is what it's supposed to be, because we have limitless potential here now. We are such resilient creatures. It's unbelievable. Like, as I said before, I went through things that I was like, I'm for sure my life is ruined from here on out, because I just couldn't function. But I would always bounce back. I would always get stronger and come back. And every time that my heart would be broken, it would heal and come back stronger, more able and more apt to love at capacities and levels that I never would have been able to before. So whatever it is we're going through, whatever is happening, like, it's amazing. Embrace it. It doesn't mean don't be afraid, but don't run away from your fears. Like, really face them. Figure out what your fear is trying to communicate to you through you, because that's what it's doing. It's by turning away from them that we get static or don't grow. But by facing them, even if we don't know what's on the other side, but just continuously coming up against it, when we have strength to do it and just keep revisiting it, it eventually dissolves and it goes away. And on the other side of that is something we couldn't even imagine.
And fear lets you know you're still alive.
Definitely. Can feel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been an awesome show. I'm going to have you back on. I just loved our talk, and I just know that we could go on for hours here. So I hope that we can have you back on the show soon and continue the conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Seth. And to the audience, thank you for being here for our very first live show. This will be continuing onward, where I will take questions from the audience when they come in.